So now that we've got our money together, how do you actually get people's attention about the media that you're creating in this completely oversaturated media environment? And to help us kind of grapple with that, we have Steve Coulson from Campfire.
Hey, good morning. My name is Steve Coulson. I'm a creative director at a marketing company in New York called Campfire. Campfire was founded by two of the producers of the Blair Witch Project. And their experience in marketing that movie, the way they blended drama with reality to create a story online for fans to engage in, really influences a lot of the work that we do. And we work with brands and entertainment companies to connect them with audiences and fan communities through immersive storytelling techniques and experiences, both online and off. Usually in advance of a show or a movie, we'll go out and try to create conversation, buzz, advance anticipation of a property for a very specific type of audience. And at the end of this case study, I'm going to talk about the kind of audiences that we try to target and the kind of interactivity that we expect from those audiences. So I'm going to talk about The Colony. The Colony is a show by the Discovery Channel. This was for the second season of The Colony. It's a cross between a reality show and a fly-on-the-wall documentary that followed a group of volunteers after they were dropped into a post-apocalyptic environment and told to survive. They had no food, they had no water, they had no electricity. And the cameras followed them for the 10 episodes as they tried to rebuild, to create all these elements from the available materials. I have a trailer here for us to watch so you can get a sense of the vibe.
The Discovery Channel dropped 7 volunteers into a condemned town.
Oh, God.
Alone.
Where am I?
They were told there was a biological disaster.
There is nothing we can do.
Told to rebuild.
We die together, we live together.
Told to restart.
I trust my fellow colonists with my life.
We all fought valiantly.
And we have fire.
If society fell apart, would you? The Colony. Series premieres Tuesday, July 27th at 10. Only on Discovery.
So while there were some faux fiction elements in this, there were marauders that attacked the encampment and such. A lot of this was about science, about how to create water that you could drink, electricity and food and shelter. And a very intense experience for all those people taking part in this environment. And when we came to this story, we started to think about how we could create a similar experience for people online in advance, how to create a personal experience that had some of that emotional resonance. And we started to talk about the concept of hacking reality, which in a sense is what the Blair Witch Project did, to kind of conveyed itself as a faux documentary. Hacking reality is not a new thing. In a sense, that's exactly what Orson Welles did with War of the Worlds back in the early 30s with that radio broadcast. One of the things that really influenced us actually was a telemovie from the early 80s called Special Bulletin that showed nuclear terrorism through the eyes of a TV broadcast. And you watched the TV broadcast, it unspooled and saw the events that were happening eventually ending in an explosion. I remember watching this in the 80s and being and coming into it in the middle of it and being really captured by this way of presenting a story. So we started to talk about how we could recreate that today. But of course, mass media has changed. The way news is delivered has changed. News is no longer just a broadcast medium. In fact, when you often hear about a breaking piece of news, this is the way you hear about it now, right? Whether it's from friends or your followers on your Twitter feed, your Facebook feed, it could be a celebrity death, it could be some of the turmoil that's going on in the Middle East. You often experience that first when it's reported to you by the people you know, rather than from those sources, which means that these guys, and I'll replace these images because I know it's coming over here. This had Walter Cronkite in it last week. The newscasters are not the only source for news now. There's a whole different category of trusted voices that bring breaking events to you, and that's these people. These are my friends and family. These are the people who I share common interests with. They could be relations, they could be people that have similar ideology, people that I associate with. And often these are the people that bring news to me first. And whether it's they're reporting it themselves or whether they're bringing a piece of content to my attention, the effect of that is they give an emotional context to the news. There's an op-ed that surrounds that news. That op-ed might be the fact that we just have a similar viewpoint or ideology. It could be that they give some context to it. And it's why we see online a lot of social causes really taking off and being embraced, because it's not just impersonal reporting. There's a personal op-ed around the news as it's delivered to you. The other thing that we're also seeing is the rise of citizen journalism, right? Everybody with an iPhone in their pocket has a news broadcasting piece of equipment, both photo, video, and the ability to send that from the scene. So if you happen to be on a plane that lands in the Hudson, you can actually take those pictures from the plane and put those into the Twitter feed before any journalist will get there. So an awful lot of, increasingly, the journalism that we're seeing is coming through street level, from photos and videos, new clips and guerrilla videos, and even status updates. So our challenge was try to wrap this changing way that people experience news and present that story of a mythical or a flu bug that was fictional, that was the launching point of this show. So here's our proposition. It's a social experiment that allows you to experience a viral outbreak as told to you by your friends and your family. Here was the first piece that people experienced. It was a video at the start of this online experience.
You are invited to participate in a social experiment as part of Discovery Channel's The Colony. In the colony, 7 volunteers are dropped into a condemned town, alone. They are told there has been a biological disaster, but what they're not told is how real it will get.
Get the supplies! We die together, we live together.
Now you too can experience how a devastating pandemic could affect you and those closest to you, your family and friends, with a specially created online simulation. Due to the extremely personal and realistic nature of the experiment, please remember, closing your browser window at any time will terminate the simulation. To continue, please log in via Facebook Connect.
There's a little bit of added drama there. If it gets too intense for you, you can close the browser. So we're using Facebook Connect. I don't know if you've used Facebook Connect. It's a technology that allows us on a website to allow people to sign in with their Facebook credentials. And when they do so, we can personalize the experience to them. We can pull in the data from their profile, where they were born, sex, their profile picture. We can pull in the town that they were born in and the town that they live in. We can pull in their job details. And we can also do the same for all of their friends. And there's no real privacy issue, because all the privacy issues are set by the Facebook users, but all this data coming in is just for you. So it's the kind of data that you would see on Facebook, and we pull that into the web experience, the story that we're about to tell you, and personalize that. So sign in with Facebook Connect, and you are presented with a reasonable facsimile of a social network. Now, let me just say that this experience is not going to be as visceral to you as it would be to the people signing in. Because immediately they did, not only were they presented with the story of the end of the world, but they would see themselves and they would see all the people they knew telling that story. And that's a really powerful emotional moment when you see your brother and your sister and your family and friends talking about what's happening to them. I've depersonalized this because these are real people, these are my friends, but for example, where Lauren Bozoth, I don't know if you can read that, but she says, can anyone else confirm the Viral Outbreak Protection Agency is doing this in other areas? Well, actually, when I got that experience, Lauren asked if they were doing that in New York, and Keith asked about it in St. Louis, for example, because what we created essentially here were Mad Libs. All of our stories created strings that personalized information went in. So each of my friends talked about what was happening in their area, or they would talk around their surroundings. For example, one of my friends could say, I thought I was pretty handy, but my job as a never prepared me for this type of experience. And then we would feed in librarian and we would feed in engineer. And those kind of really simple personal details made you just kind of immerse yourself in the reality of this experience. And so this social network started to talk about how society was breaking down around the country. A very detailed, in-depth experience, hundreds of updates, all telling not only their individual stories, but embedding pieces of media that we also create to start to tell the story. One of the easiest pieces of exposition in this case is to do a news report. And we did create a series of news reports that ran.
Still our top story, the virus that continues to affect tens of thousands of Americans coast to coast and beyond. Tonight, governors in 3 more states, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, declared states of emergency, citing rising cases of the highly contagious virus. The orders come 2 days.
Okay, so you get the idea that there were a series of these news broadcasts that appeared down the timeline as time went on, and the newsreader increasingly got less kind of neat and careful as society fell apart around her. Going down, there were the other kind of things that you could find on your social network every day. There were blog posts that we created from different viewpoints. This one is 8 myths about the virus. There were mummy bloggers talking about how it was affecting them and their children. There was a story of couples split apart and then reunited at quarantine zones. We used a lot of photographic material. These were slideshows. In fact, all these photographs, we didn't create any of these photographs. All these photographs were taken from Flickr, either with permission or we used Creative Commons licensed imagery that allowed commercial use, and we just repurposed them for the sake of the story and gave some contextualization. So you could see some of these had some Photoshop work done on them. For example, this people dozer with hope written across the side. We created some masks, put them on some characters and situations. We created some hashtag photographs that actually created the conversation, pushed that out to social networks. All of these pieces were shareable online and could be pushed out into a stream. And when you took one of those videos and pushed it out to your own social network, and I could post it on Twitter, at the top and tail of that video, there was an explanation that it was part of an experiment that the Discovery Channel were running, and that you could go to this site and you could experience it for yourself. Also, some guerrilla video.
Just wanted to check in and let you all know that I just came back from the hospital where I was all day, and as it turns out, I am fine. I'm okay. I was not expecting the hospital to have such a long wait. The line actually stretched 2 blocks from the ER. Just to get into the ER, there was a barricade.
So you kind of get the idea, and this broke down into 3 sections: the outbreak, and then the spread and the pandemic, and then kind of the fight back and survival. Seated amongst your friends were a few people you may not recognize. And those were the guys on the show. And through the social network, you were introduced to the colonists. You would find their backstory. You would see them, and different parts of the country start to converge on the place where they would eventually be quarantined. So you could follow their story and see how, as the world fell apart, how these came together. And that's kind of where the show started, and showed you what happened to that group of people. And you could discover and dig out that backstory through spending time with this experience. So you might be thinking, this is kind of a lot of work to dig out this story, right? You have to go through the social network and find the story of the colonists, and it will take quite a long time to go do that. And we did have some long session times, but clearly this is not an experience for everybody. So let's talk about how we target people at Campfire. We use this graphic a lot. We separate audiences into not demographics or psychographics, but their propensity to engage with an online experience. And we break them down into skimmers, dippers, and divers. Skimmers are what I call the average people, the normal people who haven't actually got an awful lot of time to spend digging through an online experience. They're people that are online, but they're not definitely engaging with online games and social networks in a huge way for these kind of experiences. Skimmers form probably at least 80% of the audience, and they're best served still by a lot of traditional media, by tune-in, on-air spots, by viral videos that maybe take a couple of minutes to watch. They're also very affected by word of mouth. Though these guys, the skimmers, are not the target for the work we do. We want to affect the people that will evangelize to the skimmers. We want to talk to these groups, the dippers and the divers. Dippers are people that spend maybe 30 minutes over a lunch hour. They'll tend to engage with an online experience once or twice. They'll go in and they'll watch videos. A lot of the newscast videos, the exposition was aimed at dippers. They will come away with enough of that story to want to share it with their friends and followers and talk about it. And that's how we pull the skimmers into the experience. And then there are the divers. The divers are those that really dig into these online puzzles, that would go through this experience and find the story in there. Between them, the dippers and divers probably only account for maybe 15 to 20% of the audience. And that's where we target. And that's fine, because when you look at the marketing budget of a show like this, Campfire tends to work with maybe 20% of the budget. And we use it and we target at this bottom level, which has a disproportionate impact on the spread and virality of this kind of project, because dippers and divers love to talk about what they do. You'll find that dippers and divers include a lot of journalists. So you get a conversation, a discourse of quality going on before the show comes on to talk about the show. One of the lessons, I think, from this project is that all the things that I've shown you, the fake social network, the photographs, the videos, they were kind of put together with off-the-shelf components. The Facebook Connect experience was built with WordPress, a modified version of WordPress. We spent a day in the studio shooting the newscast, but a lot of it was shot on iPhones. A lot of it was written, the photographs we used from Creative Commons. And you know, while Campfire itself is a large agency and not a cheap option in a sense, we work with very large brands, there's nothing in this experience that couldn't be built by independent filmmakers with some technology background. It's more a case of the storytelling platform and the time and some of that low technology to put these pieces together, to create kind of an immersive story world, to try to attract those people who are most likely to evangelize your product and spread the word out to that larger audience. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Steve.